Every day, somewhere up and down the country, something like this takes place. And what happens next? The 999 call goes in.
Hello, Fire Brigade. Gemini Works, River Road. Right, the Fire Brigade's on its way.
Well, that does happen, of course, but not in every case. In many parts of the country, what happens next is this. In Royal's boatyard, Pat Penn gets a call on his personal bleeper. At East Coast Joinery, Trevor Baldwin gets a call on his. Chris Kite is out in the field when she gets one on hers. At High Span Metalworks, it's Derek Elliott, because he and thousands like him across the country is a retained firefighter. Well, as you've just seen, not all fire stations are full-time, fully manned stations. Instead, all over the country, part-time retained firefighters, so-called because they are literally paid an annual retainer, turn out from their ordinary jobs whenever there's an emergency. So how come these employers are so happy to let their employees go out to fight other people's fires?
We believe that the small village fire service, which is manned solely by part-time firemen, is a very important function in a local community such as this. And in view of that, we believe also that there is a responsibility of employers to encourage the younger elements and the fit elements of their staff and employees to participate actively as part-time firemen.
Not every employer is so accommodating, of course, and in truth, some employees just can't be spared. But others can, and sometimes these people aren't released because their employer only sees the disadvantages, saying, at the drop of a hat, you might be downing tools and chasing off putting out other people's fires. Why should I subsidize the fire service? Well, there's one very good reason why we should all support our local fire service.
The fire risk in everybody's life is a very positive risk. It's a risk that nobody can ignore because it can happen any time of the day or night to any person. There's no point anybody adopting the attitude that it's never going to happen to me and I shouldn't do anything about it.
It came home to roast last year, really, when we had a fire here. And it was a matter of a few seconds. If the fire service hadn't got here when they did, then we had quite a few boats on the quay which would have been gone. It's not the material value, but the income that we would have lost because of that, would have been quite considerable.
What if nobody supported their local fire services? That's easy. No one released, no retained fire service during the day. Evenings and weekends come out of their time. No retained fire service means that a fire appliance has to come out from the nearest full-time station, and that could be minutes away. And even a minute's delay is a long time in a fire. Of course, we could take chance out of the equation and dispense with the retained fire service altogether. We could make every fire station full-time, so long as we don't object to paying much more for it. Because let's not forget that the retained fire service, which is in operation only when it's needed, is extremely cost-effective. In rural or semi-rural areas where the fire service is called out on average only 2 or 3 times a week, possibly more in summer, there really isn't the need for a full-time service. Obviously, it isn't always convenient to have people dashing out to fires and accidents. But there again, the sort of people who have the dedication to get out of bed at 2 in the morning to fight fires in their own time, if necessary, aren't the sort of people to play fast and loose with other people's time. And it's by no means unusual to find lost production made up for by the end of the week. Supporting your local fire service might not cost you as much as you think. And there are other advantages to having trained firefighters on the premises. First aid, for one thing. It's one of the less attractive aspects of firefighting that you come across situations that most of us wouldn't want to be confronted with and wouldn't have the first idea how to handle if we were. Firefighters, on the other hand, are trained to keep control of themselves and others when confronted, let's say, by a serious accident. so they can make a useful addition to your statutory first aiders.
Well, obviously we do get occasions when, you know, we need a bit of first aid, or we need advice on fire risks or whatever. You know, it has happened that we have had a car and a motorcycle over the years catch fire on the yard, and we have in our midst, you know, an experienced fireman.
So that's one major advantage of having a trained firefighter on strength. And don't forget that these people are doing pretty well the same job as full-time professionals. And it means that if a fire breaks out on your premises, he or she will know the ins and outs of your building, even in dense smoke, and that could save valuable minutes. The increasing use of complex chemicals in industry today makes trained firefighters on staff even more useful. They will know just what they're dealing with and act accordingly. And knowing which extinguisher to use on which fire can prove crucial. What's more, retained firefighters will be available to advise their employers on fire drills, sighting of extinguishers, training of auxiliary teams and fire marshals. They've seen what causes fires, and they've seen the results. And they're not about to let that happen in your premises, because they work there as well. All in all, they're a pretty handy bunch of people to have on your team.
We usually find that the part-time firemen, who are part-time firemen in our business, are some of our best employees. So I think that probably speaks for itself. They have more of a sense of responsibility about themselves, about their work, and the way they go about their work, and the way they go about their normal daily life. But we believe that one should encourage one's employees to participate. It's a very small price to pay if somebody's property has been saved and if somebody's life has been saved.
It's clear then, as we've seen, that employers who do release staff for duty as retained firemen regard it as a very worthwhile investment.
But of course, finding employers willing to release men and women for retained service is only half the story. People willing to become retained firefighters are just as important. Maybe you know someone who fits the bill. Perhaps someone in your company could be spared. Perhaps you are the sort of man or woman we're looking for.
You need to be over 18, to have good eyesight, to be physically fit and to be reasonably strong. Although this doesn't mean that firefighters need to be built like Russian discus throwers. Many women would be able to meet the physical requirements, as would most men. You can't suffer from fear of heights, obviously, or claustrophobia. And you need to be within 4 minutes of the fire station.
But there's something else you need to be a retained firefighter. And it's this intangible quality that makes such people so valuable to have around. But that doesn't mean they're members of some exclusive club. The special quality that binds them together is not some unusual qualification or unusual strength or unusual daring. In fact, this special quality isn't unusual at all.
It's different. It's just completely different, the sort of the total work that the majority of us do. I mean, so when you actually respond to an alert, you never know exactly what you've got to be called upon to do. You change it to someone else.
You're giving some help to people who cannot help themselves in that situation, be it a fire or a chemical incident or whatever. you're helping them, and also you feel that you've done something well yourself. I'm sure everybody feels that way.
You get the feeling in yourself, you know, you feel good, you can do that, you've achieved something. Even, you know, a bad RTA, if somebody's died, if you've got one person out of there alive, you've achieved something, you've helped somebody.
The area that you cover is obviously an area which is fairly close to the station. And so the people that you go shopping with and that you see out in the streets and the towns and that the part of the local community are the people that, you know, you're actually going to assist. And now they're the people you see every day of the week.
They turn around and say, what do your father does? And they say, well, his full-time employment is a television engineer, and he's also a part-time retained fireman. And invariably, the part-time or retained fireman comes out first before the full-time employment.
We can now fit into a man's world. It was a big challenge for us, and I think that we've been accepted, and although we haven't been in long, we do join in with everything that's required of us, and it has helped our self-esteem and our own confidence.
You don't want to put people's lives at risk. If there are ladies out there who are going to do the job, we'll let them come in. It's, you know, there's no concessions made. They come in, you haven't got time to make concessions. You get on that machine, you've got a job to do, and you do that job. So they're part of the team, that's it.
I think there could be occasions when a female face might be a good thing. You get to a road traffic accident or a house fire or any situation where there's a distraught lady, she might not like it, the fact that there's only men around her, that the fact there's a firewoman that can help her, that might have a calming effect.
It is a disciplined service. I mean, you've got to follow rules and regulations. If not, I mean, you can put other people's lives at risk, your mate, your own, and the people you're trying to save. So, I mean, you've got to be prepared to follow the rules and regulations.
Say you've got a big fire or something, and you've got, say, 60 men and women there. You can't have 60 people going 60 different ways. You've got to have 60 people going one way, and that is what we classify as discipline. It's all part and parcel. You've got to take notice of the people who are senior to you, because otherwise the whole thing will be an absolute shambles.
Team spirit as well. There's a lot of team spirit. You're working as a team. You're part of a team. You can't do the job on your own. It's all teamwork at the end of the day.
It will bring the best out of your character as well. It brings the best out of people, I'm sure of that. When you're put in the spot, and, you know, you respond to the best of your ability, so, you know, you can say, oh, I've achieved something.
From bleeper to fire engine on the road in 3.5 minutes, from fire station to fire soon after. That's not bad going, is it? Certainly better than if we had waited for the nearest full-time station to send over a crew. It would have taken them precious extra time to get here. But you know, there's one important thing you need as a retained firefighter that we didn't touch on, and that's time. And that's where the employers have to come in too. The firefighters themselves are making their contribution to the community's welfare, and so must the employers. Or the next time this happens, whether it's your premises or someone else's, this won't. The involvement of the retained fire service might literally be a matter of life and death, or the difference between millions of pounds worth of damage and a near miss. And if you're willing to join the retained service, it may very well be your involvement that makes all the difference. And if you're that person's employer, it might be yours.
Yeah. Back at work, Trevor, like all of them, carries his emergency bleeper at all times. And when it goes off, he dashes to the fire station. All the officers must be able to make the journey within 4 minutes. Lost seconds can mean the difference between life and death.
She can set the place on fire. Run and get the fire brigade. Get the fire brigade. See the building start to really burn. Get the fire brigade. Get the fire brigade. If you jump, you've got to wait your turn. Friends all seem to laugh. I feel I have to make a compromise. Try to reassure myself. My head must need some exercise. Run and get the fire brigade. Get the fire brigade. See the building start to really burn.
That was just one of the 360 or so calls that the Wymondham team receive every year. It turned out to be a false alarm, but it's all in a day's work for a retained fire officer. Back at the station, the crew have a chance for a break and a cup of tea before going back to their normal jobs that vary from a nurse to a railway worker.
You're always on call, aren't you? You've got this bleeper at the side of you and you dash off at a moment's notice. It must put you on tenterhooks a bit.
No, not really. Oh, I suppose for the first 5 or 6 call-outs, and after that you get used to it, rushing off.
I think a lot of people say it's more difficult for women than it is for men. But like any job, not all men can do this job. Not all women can do it either.
I enjoy my nursing. I've been there ever since I left school. And you get a break between the two. But also, you can also see people, if you've been at an RTA, you can actually see them progress and get better and nurse them at the same time, which is quite interesting.
Our average turnout from here into the centre of Wymondham itself, we can do it from home in less than about 2 minutes. Actually arriving down here and the pump arriving at the instant.
Every retained fire station in Norfolk needs more officers. Nationwide, the Home Office is hoping to attract some 3,000 volunteers who can react immediately to prevent a fire turning into a tragedy. Kay Burley, TVAM at Wymondham in Norfolk.
Well, and on those last points...
To deal with fires and road accidents. The national need for 4,000 more volunteers is reflected across the eastern counties. There are 70 vacancies in Suffolk, between 20 and 30 in Essex, 50 in Cambridgeshire and 12 in Northamptonshire. Recruits can be men or women. They must be at least 5 feet 6 inches tall, have good vision and be physically fit. They're paid a fee of £975 a year, £7.20 for each call to an incident and a weekly training fee of £6.30. The video presented by Gordon Honeycombe stresses the need for employers to free workers who want to become firefighters.
The firefighters themselves are making their contribution to the community's welfare, and so must the employers. Or the next time this happens, whether it's your premises or someone else's, this won't.
The region's fire brigades say the main problem is providing cover during the day when many people are at work, often a long distance away. The Suffolk Fire Service say they're particularly keen to find women interested in joining the brigade.
Meanwhile, full-time firemen lobbied Bedfordshire County councillors today over plans to reduce fire cover in Luton. They presented a letter to the county's Public Protection Committee condemning a decision which will cut the number.
1,000 part-timers known as retained firefighters in England and Wales. The government says thousands more are needed.
The instant response of the men and women who are the part-time fire service. For a modest annual retainer, they're on call, mainly in rural areas, for every fire emergency. But there aren't enough of them, and too many employers are reluctant to have their workplaces disrupted. This Home Office recruitment video details the essential contributions of the volunteer firefighters and urges employers to allow people the freedom to be a part-timer because it's a community service and in the company's best safety interest.
We work and earn our living in a rural district, so we like to feel that we can contribute something back to the community which we earn a living from. And the local fire service is, in our opinion, the vehicle for us to contribute to the local community.
Well, in a place like Norfolk, where out of our 40 fire stations, 34 of them are retained, I mean, if there was no such thing as retained people, it'd mean that fire cover would be provided by a small group of maybe 7 or 8 professional fire stations, which would take longer to get to the majority of the calls and would cost the ratepayers a great deal more. So all in all, you get a worse service.
The fire service needs an extra 4,000 part-timers. They must live or work within 4 minutes of the fire station, and most critically, during working hours on Monday to Friday, be able to leave their workplace instantly to provide the fastest response to every fire.
The last county cricket games of
campaign to attract more civilian recruits to the service. In East Anglia, full-time firefighters are outnumbered by volunteers who play a vital role in saving lives.
If your house catches fire, the chances are it'll be dealt with by volunteer firefighters who make up the majority of brigade personnel, especially in rural parts of Britain. People like boat painter Pat Penn from Wroxham. Joiner Trevor Baldwin has been in the service 2 years. Chris Kite joined a year ago. They have to reach their local station within 4 minutes. Every second counts. It could make the difference between life and death. Wymondham Fire Station in Norfolk's rightly proud of being chosen to feature in the Home Office promotion video. The 16 volunteers are as able as full-time personnel to handle any emergency.
Kitchen fire, station officer smart, total crew of 6. Wymondham 1.
Wymondham 1 received 1038. Gordon, go ahead, dear, over.
Volunteers are paid a retainer fee of over £1,000 a year plus turnout payments. But it's the satisfaction of helping the community that motivates recruits.
After my full-time employment, you can come home and you know you're doing something for the community as a whole you live in. You get people begin to know you, and I'm sure they respect us for it.
Retained firefighters have to enrol on a week's induction course. There's also a 2-hour drill 1 night a week. At Wymondham alone, they dealt with nearly 400 calls last year. But brigades throughout the eastern region could do with more help. The main qualification is fitness.
Well, you've got to be a certain height, 5'6" or over. You've got to be able to carry a 12-stone man 100 yards. So strength is a basic factor, but you don't have to look like, you know, some of the Russian shot putters to be able to do it. I mean, I'm not big and strong, but I still manage it okay. Have there been any problems at all, though, for you? No, not really. You know, I thought perhaps the gents wouldn't like me on a station, but I've settled down, I work all right with them, and they work all right with me. We get on very well.
One of the barriers to recruiting people like Trevor is the employer's refusal to support volunteer firefighters among their staff. Trevor answered 80 calls last year. That's equivalent to 6 weeks away from work. His boss doesn't mind.
We like to feel that we can contribute something back to the community which we earn a living from. And the local fire service is, in our opinion, the vehicle for us to contribute to the local community. We draw our employees from the area, and we like to encourage them to participate in the local community and do so ourselves.
Also, you have the benefit of having a trained fire officer on your own premises.
That's right, yes, yes. Which again is good from an insurance point of view. Insurance companies like to think that where we have this facility, we can command better rates because our risk is not quite so high.
Well, in a place like Norfolk, where out of our 40 fire stations, 34 of them are retained, I mean, if there was no such thing as retained people, it'd mean that fire cover would be provided by a small group of maybe 7 or 8 professional fire stations, which would take longer to get to the majority of the calls and would cost the ratepayers a great deal more. So all in all, you get a worse service.
So your message to potential recruits is?
My message
at the door of South Yorkshire Fire Brigade and